Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Ohio Has Issues. I'm Stephanie Haney.
I'm Mike Polk. We were just discussing it. Tell us if you agree. Stephanie just said that she thinks her shoulders are reading big right now. What do you think? Got
They're
some
reading
poofy
a little
shoulder.
big, I
Just
think.
some poofy shoulder action. I think it's jazzy.
I'm really kind of throwing my weight around today.
Looks nice. It looks like Marky Post on Night Court.
That's
a
right.
very specific reference for just 17 of you out there. And you're welcome. Welcome to Ohio Has Issues. We are the go-to show, I guess, for Ohio politics.
We are. Yeah, this is where you want to be when we're talking about all the issues across the state that are important to you.
It's really a belly of the blind kind of situation. Not a lot of people are covering it, so you got us. Sorry, folks.
That's right. You got to get in where you fit in, and this is what we're doing, at least till November, so you're stuck with us.
And it's a very important reminder, everybody. November is right around the corner, and we're going to be deciding this election ourselves, really. Like, here in Ohio, we could be deciding the balance of the Senate.
Yeah, it's an incredibly important race. Lots of people are saying it. So we give you updates on that every single week, and we get into a lot of other stuff. So this week, we're kind of focused on schools. It's the schools episode of Ohio Has Issues.
Well, we should have a bus go through here and post. Add that.
Should. Okay.
Now, here's why it's about schools. We have the proposed new bathroom rules for the K-12 students that has passed the House now and is now in the Senate, and where they'll be voting on it in November, possibly when they come back.
Yeah,
That's
they got
the
a little
earliest
bit of a break. So Ohio Capitol Journal reporter Megan Henry has been keeping us up to date on that. She also talked with a mom of a transgender girl who would be directly impacted by this.
That's right, and I spoke with Annie Anderson, that is that mother, and we'll be speaking with her as well. You got to hear from her. Then we also have a Senate race update, as we always do, let you know what's going on between Senator Sherrod Brown and Bernie Marino, the Republican candidate here in Ohio. And we're going to tell you what we're hearing from candidates about the Democratic presidential candidate, Joe Biden. You know, there's a little bit of scuttlebutt around him. I don't know if you've heard anything, but some people are talking about his candidacy.
It is an ongoing conversation.
Indeed.
So we will hear what the senatorial candidates have to say about that. We'll also take a look at the conversation surrounding former President Donald Trump and his potential vice presidential candidate. You know, we did say this is the schools episode, so we're also going to return to a topic that we talked about earlier on this show, school vouchers, private school vouchers, and what's happening with them. Spoiler alert, there's a lot of them.
There's a lot of them.
A lot
of money going towards school vouchers. We're going to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so let's get started, though, by talking about that presidential ticket in our Ohio roundup. So Senator J.D. Vance has been kind of on the short list for the presidential candidacy.
That's right. He's among 3 Republican senators on Trump's short list. This is according to sources who know stuff that we don't, because everyone's confirming that these are the 3 top candidates. That is Senator J.D. Vance, Ohio's own, and then Marco Rubio of Florida, and the electric Doug Burgum, the governor of North Dakota. Doug Burgum, you might remember him from the primary where he stood there for a while.
Yeah, let's see J.D. Vance. We have a picture of him. We got Beebs over there on the 1s and 2s.
There's J.D. Vance right there. So J.D., though, that he is, as we said, really looks like he might have a chance of tapping this VP spot. Trump took a liking to him and endorsed him. After they had a little bit of a rough I guess, honeymoon period prior to J.D. running for office, because he was not always a big Trump fan.
He was not. He said some things pretty publicly that were not so great about the former president.
In 2016, he called himself a never Trump guy. Can you believe that? And he also referred to Trump as noxious and reprehensible. But he came around, and he, in fairness, has said he proved to him through his presidency that he was a better president than he thought. And that's why he came around, he says, and now he is a possibility for being Donald Trump's running mate. Here's what he said on Meet the Press this past weekend when asked about whether he thought he might be chosen. He said, quote, "We'll let the media know if I ever get that call. But most importantly, we're just trying to work to elect Donald Trump, whoever his vice president. He's got a lot of good people he could choose from." So he has taken to the media circuit quite a lot. Seems like he's almost kind of pushing himself out there maybe as a possible candidate. So that's how he responded to that. It should be pointed out, though, that the timing of this vice presidential announcement is coming a little later than we thought it was going to. There was a rumor that he was going to talk about it before the debate, but what they're saying is because the President Biden's debate performance was considered to be so poor that he's just kind of giving that some time right now, and he's giving it a little bit more space before he makes his decision. So he's putting it off. Just as a reminder, you might remember J.D. Vance rose to fame as the author of Hillbilly Elegy, and then that was a reflection upon his upbringing, growing up in a low-income family involved in violence and addiction in Middletown, Ohio. So sort of like the political version of that song "Fast Car" by Tracy Chapman. If it were a book.
Tracy Chapman from Northeast Ohio.
Also from Northeast Ohio, wrote a song about wanting to leave as well, and she has become very famous for it. But don't look into that in any kind of a way. But anyway, that's how we all got to know him, and now he very well could be the nominee for vice president for the Republicans, which would put Governor DeWine in a situation where he would name his replacement if he actually did run and then win, and he would not have to step down if he ran. He would still get to be a senator, and then if he won, that would be decided.
Right, so status quo can continue until the election happens, and then, we figure out what happens from there.
Correct.
If he ends up being the nominee.
That's right.
So more presidential politics involving our state senators and senator hopefuls here for Congress here in Ohio. Let's talk about some reporting that's coming out, and we did actually get some breaking news this evening. So we record the show on Wednesdays at 7:30, so we can tell you right now that a Democratic senator, the senator from Vermont, has now come out and said that he believes that President Joe Biden should not be the Democratic nominee. And there's some conversation about what our Senator Sherrod Brown has or has not said about that.
That's right. He's being a bit dodgy. He's been supportive of the president, quietly supportive. He's kept his distance throughout because we are in a very, reddish, swingy state, and he's always been very careful about his language as far as supporting President Biden, but at the same time keeping some distance because he knows how unpopular the president is with a lot of his constituents. So he's had to walk that line the whole time. So people are asking him now, though, out loud, because there was a report that yesterday at a meeting amongst senators, Tuesday evening, 3 senators spoke up. This is according to reporting from CNN and from Axios. 3 senators spoke up and suggested that it was going to be harder for them to win their elections because Joe Biden's at the top of the ticket. And Senator Brown happened to be one of them. The others being John Tester and Michael Bennet of Colorado. Neither of them, those are from sources, by the way. They have not confirmed that themselves. Michael Bennet, the senator from Colorado, has confirmed that he himself did say that. You might remember him, though. He ran for president as well. He was in the primary as well. So he was actually the first senator. He didn't call for President Biden to step down, but he did acknowledge that in that meeting, he was one of the people who said, one of the senators who said that it's making it difficult. Now, when Senator Brown was asked, though, about what he had to say, he said, "I'm not going to judge people in my party, what they're saying or what Republicans are saying. I'm not a pundit. I've talked to people across Ohio. They have legitimate questions about whether the president should continue his campaign, and I'll just keep listening to people." So he is still walking that line.
And we did find out some reaction from candidate Bernie Marino about this. Friend of the show, Andrew Tobias with Cleveland.com. He was at a press conference and he live tweeted that press conference. So here's what he said that Bernie Marino had to say about this. He said that Marino accused Senator Brown of helping cover up what he called Biden's cognitive decline. And the quote there from Marino was, "Rather than say that and be honest about the fact that the commander-in-chief is incapable of fulfilling his duties, he turned a blind eye, said nothing to the people of Ohio." I do want to point out here that we are reading a quote from Bernie Marino, so the fact that he says that the current president is not capable of fulfilling his duties is a statement from Marino. That is his opinion. As we continue to move forward this conversation of what will happen. So Andrew Tobias went on to say that Marino said that Senator Brown has known Biden for a long time and holds an important position and would be in a position to be able to tell what his capabilities were. And he went as far as to suggest that reporters should potentially be looking into Sherrod Brown's capacity, which is something that we as reporters don't have any reason to question, but that is something that Marino said. And then he went on to say in that conversation, in that press conference on a separate issue, that he was continuing to advocate for a national legislation position on abortion. Marino went on to say, "I think we can get to a place where after 15 weeks, there's just some common sense restrictions." So
and that's interesting, too, because that is actually in contrast with what the former President Trump has said, where he thinks it should be decided by the states. That suggests federal action, because that is a federal. So, it's interesting to see any kind of daylight between him and the former president, because he's really been, towing the line.
He has, and we should just remind you at this point that the current Senator Brown has said that he supports what Ohio has done by enshrining abortion access into the Ohio Constitution up to 22 weeks, and we do know that Senator Brown did vote for issue 1 that did that here in Ohio this past November.
We should call out Haley B. Miller from Columbus Dispatch, who ran down really quickly what Ohio politicians had to say, if anything, about Joe Biden and whether or not he should step down. Representative Greg Landsman of Cincinnati said on Monday that, quote, time is running out for Biden. And he said the time is running out for him to make his case to voters, although he didn't directly call for the president to step aside. Representative Joyce Beatty of Columbus defended Biden after he talked to the Congressional Black Caucus on Monday. We saw the old Joe Biden, Beatty said on MSNBC. He addressed the issue and said, as he has openly, that the 90-minute debate, it was a mistake. He didn't do a good job. He was sick. He was tired. He hadn't rested enough. Since then, we've seen him make a comeback. Marcy Kaptur declined to comment. That's Representative Marcy Kaptur of Toledo. And a spokesperson for Emily Sykes from Akron did not respond to request for comment. And again, that is the reporting of Haley B. Miller from Columbus Dispatch. Thank you, Haley.
Yeah, thank you very much, Haley. Also a friend of the show. We've had her on here. Hope to have her back on again soon.
All right.
All right, now let's move to our main topic for today's issue on Ohio Has Issues. And there's an Ohio House bill, and this bill would ban transgender students in grades kindergarten through 12th grade from using the bathroom that aligns with the gender identity that they have for themselves. And this is something that Ohio Capitol Journal reporter Megan Henry has been following for quite some time. She alerted us to this several months ago, and so now let's check in with her on the status of that bill. All right, we say hello again to Megan Henry, friend of the show. Megan, thanks for being with us on Ohio Has Issues.
Thanks for having me back.
Now, we know you are always tracking what's going on in the Ohio legislature, and remind us what's going on with this so-called transgender bathroom ban bill. Where is that at?
Yes, so this bill, it recently passed in the House, but now the lawmakers are on summer break. So it passed in the House, so now we'll go over to the Senate. So this bill is not law. The Senate will come back until November after the election. So it's kind of in limbo in the meantime. The bathroom bill was added to a Senate bill, which sometimes they do as an amendment. And so that's how the bill was passed. And so the Senate will just have to concur instead of having to go all the way back through committee if it passed by itself.
Okay, and if this does become law, what does that mean? What will happen?
Yes, this would have an immediate impact on K through 12 schools and colleges and universities in Ohio. It would ban transgender people from using the bathrooms and locker rooms that match up with their gender identity. So it would basically force them to use the restroom that aligns with their gender assigned at birth. And so it would really put the onus, though, on the schools to enforce it, which it leaves this big question of who would enforce this, how would this be enforced? And we haven't really gotten a straight answer on that.
Okay, and you had a really powerful piece that came out this week where you actually talked with a parent of someone who would be directly impacted by that. Can you give us just kind of a summary of how that conversation went?
Yes, this mom, she's a real advocate for transgender issues in Ohio, specifically when it comes to students. And she is very concerned, as well as her family, about this bill. And if this were to pass, she'd be really worried about her daughter going into the men's restroom. So it's something they're keeping an eye on and they're really worried about.
Okay, Megan, thank you very much for following this, and also want to thank you here for connecting us with that mom. We'll be talking with her in just a bit, so we'll get her views on this and how this is impacting her family. We appreciate you being with us here on Ohio Has Issues.
Thanks for having me.
Megan Henry, everybody. Thank you very much, Megan, for being with us.
Good stuff, Megan. As we said, we wanted to speak with her specifically because of an article that Megan recently wrote, and the title, great title, quote, "She's not going into the boys' bathroom. Ohio mom speaks out against transgender bathroom bill." Well, that Ohio mom who felt very passionately about this, I had the opportunity to speak with her. Here's my conversation with Annie. First of all, Annie, thank you for the time.
Thanks for having me.
You were recently featured in an article by our good friends at the Ohio Capitol Journal, by the very talented Megan Henry, you and your daughter, who is transgender, to talk about the bathroom bill here in Ohio that is working its way through the legislature. And from what I understand, you're not for it. But before we even get to that, please tell me a little bit about your daughter.
She just had a birthday yesterday, so she turned 15. She likes to hang out with her girlfriends, likes to shop, likes boys, all the normal things that all the rest of the kids are doing.
Okay. So, but she's having a bit of a difficult time now because of this bathroom bill, right?
She absolutely is. It's putting a target on her that's unnecessary because they keep talking about it as if there's an issue when there has not been an issue.
It's funny you bring that up because I did look this up. I'm out of curiosity. And according to what I found, a 2018 study from Williams Institute at UCLA School of Law says there is no evidence that letting transgender people use public facilities that align with their gender identity increases safety risks. So, first of all, have you found that to be the case? And secondly, where was your daughter using the bathroom up until now?
Well, my daughter's always been going in the girls' restroom. And there's never been an issue ever. If anything, she's concerned. She doesn't want anybody starting problems with her. She's just wants to go in there and pee like everybody else does in the bathroom.
It's got to be rough. You said that she's experienced, both you and your family have experienced some harassment
Yes.
since all these recent proposals and legislation coming from Ohio about transgender issues. So tell us about a little bit about that harassment.
Well, it's coming out of the state house. We're seeing all these anti-trans bills that are getting piggybacked onto other bills. We just had the bathroom bill was added to Jerry Serino's bill, Senate Bill 104, that has zero to do with transgender people. It has to do with a college credit program. So they knew they couldn't pass the bathroom bill because they didn't have the votes. So they added it onto another bill. And Jerry Serino has other anti-LGBTQ legislation out there as well. So it's not surprising.
Transgenderism obviously isn't new. It's been around forever. It does seem like the emphasis has been on it a lot more very recently, not just in Ohio, but nationwide. Why do you think there's this new interest in, I guess, stamping out the rights of transgender people?
Well, it's become a lot like a lot of people don't know any transgender people. So it's become quite of it's being used to get votes. I hate to say that, but people don't understand a lot of what it means to be transgender. So what's happening is they're boogeymanning them down at the state houses just so they can get these bills passed when they don't have any actual data. All the bills that I've testified against, there's been way more opponents than proponents. So the numbers aren't there. The data isn't there to support why these bills are passing. More people are opposed to these bills than wanting these bills to pass.
Now, you guys are in a bit of a waiting period right now because we're waiting to find out whether the Senate approves this, but they are on their break.
Yes.
Which goes until November. What is this waiting period like for you and your family when you find out what bathroom she will be permitted to use in the next school year?
This has been going on for years. It was the athlete ban, it was the gender affirming ban, now it's the bathroom bill. You can't really plan for your future when you don't know if you might have to move. The problem is a lot of people can't just pick up and move. I take care of my dad. He's 80 years old, and I don't want to have to leave him, and we shouldn't have to leave him.
Is this a new feeling that you have here in Ohio? I mean, we've always been known as the swing state, the 50-50 state, sort of we're supposed to be this moderate place that's the middle ground politically and in every other way in the country. And it seems like it's slipping away from that. Have you noticed that as someone who has lived in Ohio your whole life?
Absolutely. We are no longer purple. It seems that we've become red. We're following Texas and Florida's lead. And it's pretty scary to see.
People are saying a lot of that's due to the gerrymandering, though. Obviously, it's not necessarily that the people feel that way. It's that's how we're being governed, correct?
Yes, correct.
And this is another example of that, I suppose. And now this is unfortunately affecting your family. And has she actually received any sort of harassment specifically to her at school or anywhere?
Yes, she's had people threaten to bodily harm to her. Been threatened not only by children, but adults in the community that are coming after her as well.
You brought up a really good point in the Capital Journal article that hadn't even crossed my mind, frankly, until I saw you say it. How would they possibly police this if this passes? Have they thought about that? Have the people in the legislature thought about whose job it will be to try and guess which students may or may not be representing the gender they believe to be correct, and then inspect them?
No, and no, they'd have no. They're just putting this out there with no guidelines, and it's going to be scary, not only for transgender kids, but for cisgender kids that might not look feminine or masculine enough. So it's going to be a problem.
So it affects everybody, not just transgender kids.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I'm sorry you're going through it. I really am. I'm sorry that it's happening here in Ohio, the state that we love. And I want to wish a happy birthday to Brady too, and tell her hi.
Will do.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Annie.
Thanks, Mike. Have a great one.
Thank you, Annie, for your time. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you hate to hear about anybody being threatened and not feeling safe and comfortable in their school.
You do. It's a very unfortunate situation. It's very weird. And again, one of the main points that she brought up in that article, and not to rehash it, but who's going to police this? Who's actually going to be in charge if this were to pass? Who's the monitor? Who do you trust to be policing the genitals of kids in school?
Right.
When they're going in, it's like, you look kind of skinny to me. I'd like to see what's going on there. Whose job is that? Who decides that? Do we have a doctor on staff everywhere? I think they have to ask these questions before we start passing legislation about it. At least tell us a plan.
Absolutely. I don't think that's something that should be left to be figured out after the fact in any situation.
Also, as she said, her daughter's been using that restroom for the better part of her schooling, and so far, place is still standing.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
So thank you very much. We really appreciate you talking with us, Annie. And also another point to just reiterate here, the Ohio legislature is on recess till November, so that's a long time to be kind of sitting in this uncertainty.
It is.
It is.
They're just taking a breather, folks. Give them a couple.
Just casual couple months off. Summer and fall and what feels like early winter break, it's fine.
And that's a rough time. That's got to be a rough thing for people to be wondering if that's going to pass or not now, going into the school year. But got to wait around.
Yeah, we'll wait and see what happens now, and we know that Megan Henry will keep us up to date on it. And now we're going to talk about a different school issue.
More scholastic stuff.
More scholastics. This is something that we first talked about on this show in April, and it is the private school voucher expansion program here in Ohio, which I'm calling a voucher explosion.
Whoa.
Been referred to as a surge, but I would call it a voucher explosion. So we have a graphic that was put together by Ideastream. I want you to take a look at this. And I'm just going to highlight the top 2 lines when it comes to private school voucher use in Northeast Ohio. Avon Local School District in 2023, there were 10 private school vouchers used. We're talking about the Ed Choice expansion vouchers here. In 2024, there were 632 vouchers used. That's an increase of 6,220%. And millions of dollars. The second line there is Bay Village City Schools, that's in Cuyahoga County. They had 13 private school vouchers in 2023. In 2024, 382 had been used. And that's an increase of more than 2,800%, $2.1 million in vouchers used there. So I think it's fair to call this an explosion. This is a significant increase in these private school vouchers.
Totally fair. And the way they're doing this is quite different now as well. That's what's interesting. If you remember, this voucher program, in theory, is supposed to exist to help people who are in underperforming school districts get out of that school district if they want to and send their children to a school district that is more successful. But what happened was when they opened this up to people who are already attending these private schools, last year, the soup was on. So if you were already enrolled, say your family was already doing okay, and you were enrolled at a private school up here in Cleveland or somewhere around, a fancy private school, now it doesn't just go to people who need it financially, it goes to people who are already enrolled in those schools. And I don't remember what the percentage was, but I know a very high percentage of it ended up going to people who were already enrolled in those schools. And therefore, you might say that it is not doing what it was intended to originally do.
And that's a little bit of the conversation that we get into with Ideastream education reporter Conor Morris. So a little background about Conor. He's covered K through 12 schools and higher education in Northeast Ohio for Ideastream Public Media for the last 2 years. He's a reporter and a producer there, and Ohio University alum. Go Bobcats, OU, yeah. And he has been a journalist for 10 years, all in newsrooms here in Ohio. So let's hear from Conor about his reporting. All right, Conor, thank you very much from Ideastream for being with us here for your first time on Ohio Has Issues. We appreciate the time.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
So you really kind of dug in this week into something that we talked about on a previous episode, which is this school voucher ed choice expansion program. So I know you're the education reporter for Ideastream. So can you kind of just bring us up to speed on what the ed choice expansion program is?
Yeah, so the Ohio legislature and the governor last year put into the budget a drastic expansion of the expansion program. So anybody who, I mean, basically anybody can or at least get some portion of a voucher to attend private schools now in Ohio. Even up to like 750% of the poverty line, you can still get a little, like what they would classify as a little bit probably, but it's still like $900 or so. The at the base level, it's like 400, it's like 450% of the poverty line. It's, like $8,000 to attend a high school. The majority of private schools in Ohio are religious as well. There are some that are non-denominational, but most of them are like Catholic or Christian affiliated. And we'd been hearing for a while that the expansion, of access to these vouchers was really going to suburban schools specifically. And so we wanted to kind of figure that out. And so we dug into like the statewide data to see where it was happening. So which families are choosing to take these vouchers essentially, and found in, across the state. So the state codes schools in based off of if they're like a suburban school, an urban school, a rural school, etc. Even down to the relative wealth of the community. So there's wealthy suburban, there's poor small town. And for the wealthy suburban and suburban school districts, the increase was dramatic across the state. So no matter what, if it's the suburbs of Columbus or Cincinnati or Cleveland, it was a pretty significant and drastic increase. One of the reasons could be that before, with these Ed Choice vouchers, you would need to you'd either need to live in a quote unquote low performing school district, or you would need to, and that's according to the state, that's not my words, but or you would need to be qualified based on income. It was like 200% of the poverty line, I think. But now anybody can get these, and so your relative family wealth doesn't really matter, and so a lot of folks were probably realizing they could take advantage of it.
So when you say anybody can get these, what do we mean by that exactly? Is there any limit at all? Is there a limit in the number of vouchers that can be handed out? Is there a limit in the number of dollars that can be handed out?
I just looked at the document the other day and it was like 750% of the poverty line plus. So even if you're above it, you still get that $700 or $900 if they're in high school, or they give you a little bit less money if you're in elementary school. So more for high schools. So yeah, eligible for eligibility was really expanded drastically last year for sure. And what we are finding as well too is the number of public school students in Ohio has only dropped a little bit, about 5,000 students or so. Still, public schools educate the vast majority of students in Ohio, 1.7 million or so. And the number of private school students has only increased a little bit as well, like 3,000, and there's only about 150,000 or so. So we're not really seeing, even though a lot more people are taking the vouchers, we're not seeing people leaving their public schools. We're not seeing people going to these private schools in droves really necessarily. It really seems to be the case that it's families that were already sending their kids to private schools who are taking advantage of these vouchers. So.
Okay, so these are people who were already choosing to pay for private school who are now using these vouchers that come from taxpayer money in the state of Ohio.
Yeah, and to be fair, I mean, folks are saying, why not? The money is there. Why shouldn't I take advantage of it? Anecdotally, we've even been hearing about some private schools that have been asking families to actually apply for the vouchers as they apply for the school. So, and they understand. On the one hand, for these private schools, kind of in their defense, what they would say is, hey, it's available. The money is out there, you know. Also, it allows them to rely less on their kind of foundation, private support that they get to keep themselves going. So it's not like they're getting like a big windfall of new cash. It's more like it's supplementing, it's probably good for their bottom line in general, but it's kind of supplementing, what they were already trying to bring in with scholarships and things like that. So
I see. So it's not necessarily something that we're thinking is a windfall for these private schools, but it is a benefit to these families who were already paying X amount of dollars. Now they're paying a little bit less because they're getting this money back.
Sure. And some of the private schools are probably, making they're saving more because they're not, having to ask for donor support as much, now. So typically private schools will have like scholarships available for students based on need or poverty status, essentially. And so they're like, oh, we don't have to give out as much of this now because families are already coming with the money that they need. So.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to ask you about this. In your reporting, you did mention, obviously there are going to be people who like this and people who don't like this. So can you summarize for me kind of both sides of that equation? What are the people who are for this expansion program saying? What are the people who are against it saying?
Yeah. So the folks who are for it are saying, look, taxpayers are taxpayers. They're already, paying taxes even if they send their kid to a private school. So why should they not see a benefit of their taxpayer money supporting the school that they send their kid to? Opponents say, well, you're electing to move your kids away from the taxpayer funded system. You're already sending your child to a private school. You're making that choice. So you should pay for it. As well, some folks have concerns about the religion aspect of this too as well. They're saying, hey, I'm concerned that my taxpayer money is going to fund what is very often a religious education. What about a separation between church and state? Not to get too policy wonky on you, but there was the Supreme Court decision out of Cleveland, and I believe it was like 1999, 2000. The initial school voucher system started out of Cleveland actually because the schools were low performing in the 90s, and the state kind of their solution was, hey, let's fund kids going to private schools. The initial lawsuit was arguing that was violating separation of church and state, and so the Supreme Court 5-4 decision, I think it was like Zellman versus something or other, found that it did not violate church and state, and that kind of set up this whole kind of school choice movement in Ohio and across the country, the legality of it, that you could in fact have taxpayer money funding. Essentially it's going to the parents first and then to the school. So that's kind of where the separation is legally, I suppose. So that's been a very fascinating part of this as well too. Folks saying this violates church and state, and then other folks say no, it doesn't.
Sure. What about the argument for the intent and the purpose of school vouchers? What are people saying about that on either side?
Sure. So the initial, exactly going back to that, early Cleveland school voucher kind of, system being put in place, folks were saying, look, we need to make sure these children, the most marginalized children, have access to a good school system, because if not, they're never going to be able to find their way out of poverty, And that was kind of how the voucher system was set up initially. It was, there were income limits, as I mentioned before, and it just got expanded over the years until now we are where we are, where everyone can get access. And so a lot of the folks that are on the opposing side of vouchers say, that is the issue here, is you're continuing to expand, and now it seems to be only benefiting wealthy folks rather than the most marginalized, the most needy children and families, which was they are used kind of the original intent. And folks on the other side of it again say, hey, look, like the law is the law. We can do this, so why shouldn't we? And they also say too that public schools did receive a decent amount of funding increase, like statewide, in the last budget cycle last year. So it's part of the Fair School Funding Plan. Your viewers might have heard of this before, where it's a system of trying to better fund school systems because they're often heavily reliant on like property taxes. And that was deemed unconstitutional by the state Supreme Court a while ago, and back in the 90s. A lot of history we're going into today.
One argument I have heard,
Yeah.
if I can just bring it back to that a little bit though,
Sure.
is there are a certain section of people saying that if it's about education access, that should also extend to people who are in those suburban and middle to wealthy income classes as well. Is that something that you saw in your reporting?
Absolutely. Yeah. We had folks that were commenting on, after we'd done the story, that were saying, look, like I don't like I don't like my public school, and I believe that, I should be allowed to afford the education experience that I want, for my kids. There is an aspect of culture wars at play here too as well, where folks are saying, I believe my kids are being indoctrinated by the public school system, that I believe that they are being, taught things about LGBTQ identities, affirming LGBTQ plus identities that I don't agree with. And they say, I want them to have a traditional, religious schooling. And so, why is that educational experience not being prioritized? Why do people think that educational experience should not be prioritized? Is the argument that we were hearing from people. So.
It is definitely an interesting scenario here. A lot more dollars going out through this particular type of voucher program here in Ohio. This is beyond the scope of the article that we're talking about right now, but I'm just wondering if you've seen anything or if you have anything coming down the pipeline or anything about what this will do to kind of the Ohio budget with this huge amount of money that's now going here that wasn't going here before.
Yeah, the Legislative Services Commission's estimate for this voucher expansion was about $1 billion alone for the 1 year. And, before, I mean, that's more than double what it was before. So drastic expansion for sure. I think that, part of it too is we'd heard some things from the legislature that this might not be tenable to expand funding for both public schools and private schools. So, who knows? The other aspect of this too that's interesting is there might be more funding coming down the pipes for rural private schools, because there are not very many private schools in rural Ohio. And so this drastic expansion is not really impacting. We looked through the data actually, and in rural Northeast Ohio, very few people are able to use the vouchers in their county, because there are no private schools really available, or they're a long drive away. So we might see more funding actually from the legislature for opening up more of those private schools in rural areas. So we'll have to see where that goes.
Well, if you're in the business of opening private schools, you might want to go to a private school desert, if you will. That might be financially beneficial for you. And that creates a whole host of other things that I'm sure, if that happens, Connor, maybe you'll be covering them, and maybe we'll be talking about that.
I'd love to come back on. That'd be great. Yeah.
All right, Connor, we appreciate your time. Thanks for breaking this down for us here on Ohio Has Issues.
Absolutely. It was fun. Thanks.
So that was Conor Morris from Ideastream, and we will have his article linked in the show notes. So you're going to want to check that out, because that kind of really lays out where these vouchers were being used, where they're being used now, and the major increases.
That was very useful. Thank you, Connor. Now, we did something earlier about this, though, and people can go and check those out if they want to learn more, right?
Yes. So in April, we had a conversation about this, a really extensive conversation, and we talked with two people, because some people are for this, some people are against this. So we talked with School Choice Ohio CEO and President Eric Yates-Frank. That group supports the idea of voucher expansion. And then we also talked with Vouchers Hurt Ohio Coalition Executive Director Bill Phillis. You can guess what side Bill Phillis is on.
That sounds like a fair and balanced presentation of both sides of the argument that will allow people to choose for themselves.
Sure does.
Nice job, Stephanie.
That was the goal. So we do have that. You should check it out. And there is a lawsuit that's ongoing that was filed by Bill Phillis and his group against this voucher expansion in this situation. So check that out. I think
Getting a little catty over there. Getting a little catty.
Yeah,
apparently.
It's a heated debate.
Well, we hope you learned a lot about schools and whatnot in Ohio this week here on Ohio Has Issues.
It is definitely a fast-moving situation right now, especially what's going on with our U.S. senators for Ohio. So we're going to be following all of it, and we'll be back next week with more for you.
Picking up steam, folks. See you soon.